Well, hello, everyone. As you're starting to log on, I see participants joining. We've still got a couple minutes, so I was going to have music playing and I don't know, something entertaining, but I apologize, I didn't do that. Oh, well, sorry, that's what I planned on. So welcome. I hope that everyone's enjoying this beautiful sunshiny day and had lots of chocolate yesterday. We did a new thing this year when we went to See's Candy. You know, I always get the, my husband gets me the pre-packed box, and I don't know why, but I didn't know you could pick out all your own for just a little bit more. So there are no more blueberry walnut yucky ones that I have to suck the chocolate off and throw away. It's a whole box of Bordeaux's and chocolate cream. So just letting y'all know I'm a happy girl. All right. Oh, Lori can't hear. I don't know why. Can anyone else hear me? Okay, Lori, it might just be you, friend. Maybe check your settings. Let's see. I always forget how to do this. Let us know if you can't work that out, but I think we're okay on our end, technology-wise. Let's see. Oh, we got another question. Maria, do you want to, oh, she got it, good, okay. Do you want to maybe monitor the question answer when we get, until we get started, please? Let's see. All right. Well, it is 10 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started, everyone. I see we've got our crowd started. All right, first off, we have Maria Gonzalez Olivares. You want to wave, Maria? There's Maria. She is interpreting for us into Spanish. If you need that feature, along the bottom of your screen, you're going to see a globe. It looks like, you know, the World Wide Web symbol. Click on that, and Maria will be there to interpret for you. All right. And and then let her know you're there, and she will spend time with you. Let's see. Okay. So let's get started here. Welcome, everyone. So we're here for Regional Center 101 and self-determination. I want to do a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We're in webinar mode. For those of you who have attended before, you know my spiel that your cameras and your mics are off, which is wonderful for you because you get to be in your jams, having your cup of coffee, snacking on your donut, and none of us can see you. So you're all good. Relax and enjoy yourself. Questions. Please use the question and answer feature. It's much easier for us to keep track of those questions using that versus the chat. We also, the chat's still available if you want to connect with one another, or we might ask a question for participation. So it's there, but if you have a specific question of any of us, please use the question and answer. We are recording this and it will be posted on the YouTube channel. Along with that, in the following days, give me about 48 hours to send all the registrants of this webinar an email. You're going to get an email. It's going to have the link to the recording. It's going to have all the resources you need, the link to the handouts, your certificate of attendance. It'll also have the link to the survey. When we get started in just a bit, I'm going to post that link to the handouts as well in the chat, and you can access that. Important, please, when we finish today, you will see a link to a survey pop up. It is very brief. It is the same similar questions that you answered when you registered. There were just like 4 questions. That's part of the grant funding. And it's really important for me to know if I'm meeting your needs and helping you learn. And just a reminder, this isn't legal advice. It's just intended for that parent support and to help you learn as an information session. That is not what I wanted, sorry. Okay. There we go. Okay, so I'm Leanne. I'm the coordinator of the Family Resource Center, and I serve Clovis Unified, birth to 22. Here we go. So I want to talk about what a regional center is. We have got a whole panel of wonderful ladies from the regional center, and they are going to give you that specific information that you are craving, all about the self-determination program, because that is the hot topic going on right now. I know among families, they want to know. So we're going to get to that, and I'm going to let those experts share that with you. But I just want to go over, because we have often such a wide variety of attendees, which leads me to, do you want to launch that poll? Do you have access to that, Maria? We have just a quick poll that to tell us what your role is here. Let me see. Oh, I can launch it. There we go. And it's just going to give us a little idea if you're a parent or a professional attending, because we get both. We get college students, we get a wide variety of people and why they're attending. So there we go. Okay, I'm gonna minimize that. It looks like it's pretty much split. So I wanted to let you know about Regional Center. Again, many of you, if you're on here for that specific self-determination information, you're like, Leanne, I know what a regional center is. That's why I'm here. but just be patient for a couple minutes. This is just going to be very brief and a very broad overview, okay? Just again, to give those that are not that familiar with this system what it is. And so the California Department of Developmental Services, our first acronym, DDS, they oversee the regional center system. There's 21 regional centers throughout California. How families are determined which one serves them is, based on your location, your zip code. It is one of the things that is so confusing for families often is that, and we'll get to this in a minute, but regional centers are unique to California. And so many families, are mobile nowadays, right? They're moving and even moving within the state and trying to transfer regional centers can be confusing. I get that call often, how do I even do that? And so again, that's what service coordinators are, willing to help you with, but often it can be confusing for families to know how to navigate it. So regional centers provide diagnosis and assessment of eligibility. I highlighted that assessment of eligibility. Again, one of the things that I just had a parent cafe recently, and I was talking to families about how confusing navigating all these different systems are. Like, you just feel like you've learned one system And then whether that's the medical model or the educational model or the regional center model, and then you find out, oh yeah, none of that applies to this system. And so it's important to know that, regional center they're going to assess for eligibility. So often, again, I get questions from families. They say, well, the school district determined my child, needs an IEP, and they have this disability, and they diagnosed them with, like, let's say autism. And I said, no, school districts don't diagnose. And so again, it's just all the terminology and learning all the different systems, but it is important to know that they have their own set of criteria for what eligibility is, and they're in charge of assessing for that. So as I mentioned, the regional center is unique to California. Again, this is just a real simple overview, but you can think of services into two different groups as well. Early Start, which is birth to 3, and then Latterman Act, which is over the age of 3. And another important thing that I always like families to learn is you can self-refer. I know for our regional center, CVRC, Central Valley Regional Center, it's right on their website, how you can call them, you can email them, you can, I don't know, I don't see carry or pigeon as an option, but they are very flexible. They provide it in different languages, and they really want to make it very family friendly, which I appreciate. All right, so again, just a brief overview. Early Start, that's for children birth to age 3. So we're talking early intervention services. That can be a child that maybe was born with a developmental disability, and so the hospital identifies them at birth and is going to send over that referral. So an example would be maybe Down syndrome. But it can also be children who are at risk of a developmental disability. For instance, premature birth, that there's a high risk of a developmental delay. And again, families, maybe your kiddo's 2 and not speaking. Families can self-refer and say, I have got a concern about my child's development. Again, regional center will assess and see if they're eligible for those Early Start family-based services. Because I didn't want to go into too much detail, because this webinar is not about Early Start, I did put some Early Start frequently asked questions in the drive, which you'll have access to later, in both English and Spanish. So, Latterman Act services. So these are over the age of 3, and eligibility requires a diagnosed developmental disability. But again, where families can get confused as well is they'll say, well, my child has a diagnosis of, let's say, autism. Why don't they qualify? Again, it's a substantial disability. I am not remotely going to pretend to be an expert on all that criteria, because it's a whole thing, right? And that's what they are experts in. I just want you to have a general understanding, again, that regional center is going to assess. Under California law, that means the disability had to start before they turned 18. It's that it would continue or be expected to continue indefinitely. So this is a lifetime service they're looking at, and that it is a substantial disability. And I just gave a few examples of what they consider functional limitations. And again, this is a whole metric of criteria. So I just wanted you again to have an overview. So these are, if you're at all familiar with IEPs, we've got our categories of eligibility. This is similar. You've got intellectual disability, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, autism, and then you've got that 5th category, which I, in my mind, think of like in IEP land, the OHI, the other health impairment. So this is going to be something that is, it's closely related to these other categories. But there can be conditions, often like a rare genetic condition, let's say, that is the symptoms are very similar to these other disabilities. Okay, so that being said, because I just threw a whole bunch of information at you, I wanted to share with you too what family resource centers do very briefly. So DDS also provides grants to family resource centers to serve families who are trying to navigate through all of this. For example, a couple of grants that the Clovis Family Resource Center receives from DDS is an Early Start grant. That's why I'm housed right there with our City Kids program, and to really help families understand the IFSP process, and very importantly, that transition at age 3 and what that can look like. Also, there's new funding that came out of the state budget for the Community Navigator program, and that serves the whole lifespan, again, of families trying to navigate resources. Who do I call? And so each of the 47 family resource centers, they're unique. Some are housed in NICU units. Like myself, I'm part of a school district, and that's very unique. Some are in their regional center, so they're serving families right there. So a lot of different places that the family resource centers that are a part of the Family Resource Center network. Lots of agencies use that term, but I'm speaking specifically of family resource centers that are a part of the network and a part of DDS services. So, and again, we're all unique in what we focus on, and what our specialties are, or what our population we're serving are, but in general, we're all there to do parent-to-parent support, educating families on their parent rights, doing things like this, parent education workshops, and we participate a lot in public awareness and building that community with the other agencies serving families. So we have those good relationships and can refer. All right, so that was my very quick overview. I hope you didn't feel like you were drowned in a in a storm, but I want to turn it over to the experts now. This is our team from Central Valley Regional Center, and I am going to stop sharing, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves and share their screen. While they're getting set up real quick, I just want to tell you the results of our poll too. We 57% are parent or family members, and 46% are professionals or students. So that was there. All right, ladies, it's all you.
Great, thank you, Leanne. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We will be reviewing with you today what self-determination is. Some of you may have heard it called SDP. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. At Central Valley Regional Center, we have 3 offices. We have an office in Fresno, Visalia, and Merced. Our office has 3 participant choice specialists. So what does that mean is that we will assist families in transitioning to the self-determination program, as well as our CVRC service coordinators and management with supporting them with a self-determination case. Myself, Maria, and then we have 2 other participant choice specialists, Deidre Nelson and Samantha Carmichael, and all 3 of us cover all 3 offices. Just a little bit of housekeeping, like Leanne had mentioned. Please hold your questions until the end. If you would like, you can put them in the question and answers, and we will answer them. And also please remain on mute. Just a few key things that you guys may want to know about what is self-determination. Federal funding was approved for this program back in 2018. The Department of Developmental Services, known as DDS, they selected 140 of the individuals from our regional center to participate in the self-determination program. In July of 2021, this program was open to anyone who was regional center and was over the age of 3. To be eligible for self-determination, you have to be over the age of 3, which is Lanterman eligible, and you have to live in the community or planning to transition into the community. So what that means is if you have a family member or a loved one who lives in a Medi-Cal funded facility, you would have to have a plan for them to transition out of that setting in order to be eligible for the program. But of course, that is something that you can talk to one of us or your service coordinator on working on that plan or what that looks like for your loved one. The self-determination program, it's a voluntary option, so it's not something that you need to do. I know a lot of our families will say, is it mandatory? It's not. It's an option that's open to any of our families, like I said, who are individuals are Lanterman eligible over the age of 3. So it's a voluntary program. The self-determination program is made up of 5 principles of self-determination. Our first one is freedom. That is that you get to make the own decisions of your life. You get to drive your program. So that's the first one, is freedom. The next one is authority. That is that you are taking the responsibility for your budget that is given to you by the regional center for purchasing your services and your supports. The next one is support. This is the one where you get to pick who is going to be working for your loved one, what are the services and supports that you're going to choose, and who are the people that are going to help you achieve those goals. The next one is responsibility. This is where you are responsible for all the decisions that you make. So this is a huge piece that we really emphasize. They're all very important, but this one is the responsibility is a very huge piece for self-determination, because you're really being the driving force of this, of your self-determination plan. So you're making sure that the things that need to get done for your child within the program, that you're responsible. So you're taking on more of a responsibility for the things that you have in the self-determination program. The last one is confirmation. This is that you get to design the services that best fit your needs. So these are the principles that make up our self-determination program. And you will hear more about these principles as you go through the self-determination program. So I know a lot of you are wondering, how is this different from what my child is currently receiving at Regional Center? So with the self-determination program, our individuals, they can access non-vendor providers and services. So a good example of that is if you're receiving respite services from a respite agency, sometimes we may not have workers that can fill that role of providing respite for you. So maybe the agency that you're working with will provide you a worker to fit that need. In self-determination, when we say you can access non-vendor providers, that means that if you have somebody over the age of 18 who can provide that service to you, that you feel comfortable having that person provide that for your loved one, That is what we mean, non-vendored services. That's just one example, but there's many ways that what that can look like for you. The other thing is that you work with a budget to purchase your services and supports. Right now at the regional center, if you need a service, you just call your service coordinator. They review it with their program manager to see what the need is. In self-determination, the difference is that once services are approved, you get a budget that is showing you what are the services that we are providing to you with that dollar amount. So that's the difference, is that now you get a certified budget for those services. The other unique part about the self-determination program is what's called an independent facilitator. So you might have heard this role called an IF. An independent facilitator is very unique to this program because right now, if you were to call your regional center service coordinator and say, I'd like to work with an independent facilitator to help me, you would not be able to access that service because it's only available if you're going to transition to the self-determination program. And we'll go more into what that role of that person is in another slide. But I just want to point out that in self-determination, you have that option to work with somebody. You don't have to work with somebody as an independent facilitator, but it's a great option for you if you're looking to go into the self-determination program. The other thing that in self-determination you would have to use is an FMS agency, which we call financial management service. What does that mean is that this agency is going to pay for services, supports, manage the payroll for your person that you're hiring to work with your loved one or your child. So that is one of the mandatory requirements, is that you must use an FMS agency to manage your budget. We do have a list of those for you to choose from, and we'll go more into that with you as well. So how does this program work? So the first thing we see when we look here is that the individual will start with what's called person-centered planning. So the person-centered planning is, just to kind of give you an overview, it's really you guys coming to the table discussing what are my child's needs, what are my loved ones' needs, how are we going to get there, who are the people that are in my life that can support me to reach those goals. So the first thing we would do is you would create that person-centered plan. Then you would start discussing all these things that you see. You would discuss, maybe you're having that independent facilitator work with you to create that plan. You don't have to use an independent facilitator, but it's a great option that our families have to do that. You would then be reviewing the budget from Regional Center with myself, Deidre, or Samantha, and your service coordinator to see, what services we're currently funding. So we'll review that with you. And then once the person-centered plan is completed, then the next step is presenting that to CVRC to review, what are unmet needs that you need that might change what that certified budget looks like. And like I said, you would work with a financial management service. That's the only vendor required service, is for you to have a FMS agency to manage that budget. You would still have your CVRC service coordinator. That would not go away. And then the other one is the spending plan. That's what I call the fun part, is where you take your budget and now you're allocating that budget for the purchases and supports and those people that are going to work with your loved one on those goals and needs that you have. In person-centered planning, this is where you're going to look at everything you're like I said, all your goals, your dreams, how you're going to get there. One of the things that we always point out is that Even though you're going to be in self-determination, you're still going to access generic resources. You're still going to look at natural supports. One of the important things to remember is if you have more generic resources like Medi-Cal, in-home support services, Social Security, natural supports such as a mom or a dad or an uncle or an aunt who's going to provide support without payment, it frees up your budget for you to use it for other things that you need. So that's very important to remember. You must still access generic resources, even in the self-determination program. When you are looking at person-centered planning, you want to make sure that you're looking for services that are meeting your loved one's needs, that all the individual goals on that plan align with any services, supports that your loved one is needing. And then the last one is that any goal you're having, any need that your child or loved one is needing, we want to make sure that that individual has full access to the community. So for example, if you're looking for a social rec class, we want to make sure that that class is giving them full access to the community, that it's not just a class that's open for those individuals with disabilities, but that is a class that anybody can take, that you and I can sign up for. And we'll go more into that in the next few slides.
All right, so now we're going to discuss the role of the Regional Center Service Coordinator. So when an individual becomes eligible for Regional Center services, they are assigned a Regional Center Service Coordinator. When you transition to SDP, you will continue to have that same service coordinator, and your service coordinator will continue traditional case management services. So they will continue to help you with supports and services that meet your needs. So these can be vendor services. They will also help you determine your individual certified budget, which is unique to SDP. So they will work with you, your team, and our SDP team to develop that individual budget, which you would agree to, which would make that a certified budget. And they would continue to work with you or meet with you at minimum one time per year to develop your IPP plan, which is your contract with the regional center, which outlines the services and supports that you need that will help you reach your goals. So in addition to that, your regional center service coordinator can act as the independent facilitator. There are some limitations if you use your regional center service coordinator as the independent facilitator. And so if you're not familiar with that term, an independent facilitator is a unique role or service to the self-determination program, and we'll be discussing that role next. But it is a voluntary service, so you do not have to have an independent facilitator. So if you choose to use your service coordinator, the service coordinator can really only help you with the vendor services. They're not able to support you to the full extent that a non-regional center independent facilitator could. All right, and so we'll go into the role of the independent facilitator. This is basically a person that helps you with your supports and services in the self-determination program. They can also help you transition from the traditional model of service delivery to the self-determination program. They are a great resource. They're very knowledgeable about self-determination programs and services. They should be knowledgeable about community resources, generic resources, the regional center, so our Lanterman Act, and all of those laws as well. They can help you with vendor services along with your service coordinator, and they can help you access non-vendor services and resources. So the independent facilitator has to have, we refer to independent facilitators as IF. They have to have an IF training in order to be paid to provide services for regional center individuals. So if you choose an independent facilitator, they can work in one or two ways. So they can support you with the transition, which is not a service that you would have to pay for. That is funded up to a certain dollar amount that is funded through DDS and paid out by the regional center. Once you transition to SDP, they can support you as a service that you choose, and you would set the rate that you would want to pay that independent facilitator and the hours that you'd like to utilize them throughout a budget period. There are some people that cannot be paid independent facilitators, and that is parents of minor children or spouses of regional center consumers. So if the individual is an adult, a parent can become their paid independent facilitator. They can also choose to be an unpaid facilitator. That means they can support them and perform all the roles of an independent facilitator, but they would not be paid out of the person's budget. And there are some other stipulations with that. So the independent facilitator cannot perform more than one paid service. So if they are providing independent facilitator services, they would not be able to provide another service like be a support staff, things like that. Just really quickly with that, I just wanted to say that you can choose how much or how little you'd like to use that independent facilitator. That's totally up to you. So some of the things that they would help you with is developing a person-centered plan, helping you find services and supports that meet your specific needs, and helping you develop the cost or the rate that you would like to pay out for a service. All right, so now we're going to talk about the financial management service. And if you remember, I believe Maria said that this is the only vendor service that is required. And so the financial management service, which we also call an FMS, they are the ones that would handle your budget. So all of the money that you are allocated for up to 12 months or 1 year, that money would be managed by an FMS agency. They are the only vendor provider that you have to use. The FMS agency would be the ones to verify provider qualifications. So if you, let's say you'd like to use independent training or counseling services, the FMS would verify that that provider has the proper credentials, licensing, or background to provide that service for you. If you would like to use support staff, the FMS would verify that background checks have been completed and the person is cleared to provide that service. They would also be the ones to pay out your providers. So if you're using an agency, the agency would submit the invoices to the FMS and the FMS would pay them directly. If you're using direct staff, your staff would submit their time cards or their billing invoice or their billing claims or logs to the FMS, and they would be paid directly from the FMS. So the FMS would be considered their employer with you, depending on the type of FMS model that you choose. And again, the FMS agency is required. They have to manage that budget. So the date that you'd be able to transition into SDP would be the date that that FMS is able to take you on. All right, so next we're going to start talking about the individual budget. So the first thing I want to say about the individual budget is that that is unique to SDP, and the budget is based off of, the initial budget is based off what the regional center paid out for services for the individual in the prior 12 months. This can be a zero budget, that's okay. It can be less than 12 months of service, and it could be no services at all. The person can still transition to SDP if they have not received any paid services from the regional center. The next thing is the individual budget is based on what the regional center would have funded regardless of whether they transition to SDP or not. So if a person has an individual budget that is $50,000, they would still have that same amount of funds being paid out through the regional center if they were receiving traditional services. So that's something to keep in mind. Under the traditional model, if an individual wants services, they let their service coordinator know, and the service coordinator will, reviews their request and then lets the individual know if a service is approved. They don't necessarily know the cost of that service. They just know that they're receiving a service that they requested. But with an individual budget, the amount that the individual receives should be the same as what the regional center would have paid out if they were providing that service through the traditional model. And then again, the individual budget amount can change. So we start with an initial amount, which is based on the prior 12 months. And then that budget can change based on any unmet needs or any changes in circumstances that would result in a need for additional service or an increase in hours. And then again, what Maria said, we have to utilize generic resources first. And so the individual that goes into SDP is agreeing that they will access generic resources first at the regional center, or their SDP funds would be used as a last resort, and that the services will be cost effective. All right, so once the individual budget is certified, when it becomes a certified budget, the next step would be developing a spending plan. And so the spending plan is the list of supports and services that the individual has outlined for themselves that meet their needs. That's based on initially that person-centered plan that they worked on prior, and then it aligns with their ITP goals. And so we have specific SDP services. And so any service that is included in a spending plan would fall into one of those 42 services that are called, they are federally recognized services. And so the key thing to note is that the individual, the SDP participant, is the one to choose the supports and services that best meet their needs. So they're able to tailor the services to fit their needs. That means when they'd like to receive the service, where they'd like to receive the service, the frequency, the length of time, how much they'd like to pay their providers, and who they'd like to provide services for them. Again, they have to access generic resources first, and some of those generic resources would be Medi-Cal if the individual is school age, the school district, DOR if it's an adult wanting to go into the workforce, in-home supportive services, which is a county service that is funded by Medi-Cal. And there's a list of services, but if a service can be paid by, or it should be funded by one of the generic resources, we have to look into that first to see what they cover. And then you can use your spending plan if there's an additional need that that generic resource does not meet. And so when a person transitions to SDP, they, along with their team, are taking on the responsibility to monitor that budget, along with the FMS. So especially if you choose a co-employer model, there are different types of models, but if you choose that co-employer model, the FMS will support you in monitoring that budget. They provide monthly budget reports or monthly spending plan reports so you can track the spending. But it's ultimately up to you to ensure that if you have allocated workers 20 hours per month, that they're working only 20 hours per month, because if they're working 24 hours a month or anything above that, then your budget won't last for the full period that it was intended to last. So the responsibility to monitor hours and ensure that their staff are not working overtime, that would fall on the family or the individual and their support. All right, and then so once you develop your spending plan, so you've decided all the services that you need, we agree that these are federally recognized services, meaning they fit into one of our 42 SDP service codes. The next step is to ensure that each service is HCBS compliant. We call HCBS stands for Home and Community-Based Services. And the final rule is in place to support the individual, to allow them to have more flexibility in the services that they receive, more control over the types of services that they receive. So going back to those 5 principles, authority, control, support, the HCBS final rule is there to ensure that those services are tailored to fit that person's unique needs. So they ensure that the person is able to make their own choices within the federal requirements, that the person is able to live in the neighborhood of their own choosing. So if they prefer to live at home with their family, if they'd like to live on their own independently, if they'd like to rent or have a lease or have roommates, HCBS final rule states that the person has the choice to decide that, along with their support team. So we understand that people rely heavily on their family and their circle of support. And so HCBS allows that individual, along with their trusted support, to make those decisions that would best fit their needs. Some of those other options would be the option to work or volunteer. So if an individual needs support to go to work, whether it's part-time or full-time, or if they just like to volunteer. So if they want to do something that they enjoy, that is not, they're not getting paid for, and services are required to ensure that they're able to do that, that is a part of the HCBS final rule. So it says they're able to do that. HCBS also ensures that the individual has the right to choose whether they want to receive services or interact with people with and without disabilities. So it gives them more options to interact and engage in the community of their choosing. So self-determination program is designed so that the individual is the center of their services and that they are fully included in that community that they choose.
Thanks, Deidre. So this is just some of the ideas of what some individuals have done with their SDP budget. This is not all inclusive. And it's important to point out that not everybody necessarily will have these needs. So these are just some ideas. So one big thing that we see a lot is people like to transition to self-determination, typically because possibly they feel the regional center, which not the regional center, the state, I should say, because the state sets the rates, don't pay, their direct care staff to the degree that the family feels they deserve. So one thing we hear commonly is maybe like, my child has behaviors and this one specific person works really great with them and I really want to keep them. I don't want to lose them and I want to be able to pay them more because I want to keep them. They're important to my child's life. So with SDP, there is that flexibility, since you have that budget, to pay those support staff more. It is important to note, though, like Deidre mentioned, your budget is only going to reflect what the regional center would have paid regardless. So if we say we're only paying, for respite, for example, $20 an hour, and then you choose to pay your worker $25 an hour, just know you're going to have to move money around to accommodate that pay rate. So the regional center is not going to pay service for service. So it could work that way or the opposite. Maybe we pay more than, for an hourly rate than you wanted to pay somebody, and then you'll have the flexibility to put more money elsewhere or make another purchase. So we do see that a lot. Supports to live on your own. So some mostly are adult individuals, they have those goals of wanting to live independently. They want to learn some skills. And so they'll use money to hire people either to teach them those skills, to help them transition. Maybe they've located a housing situation and they want to hire people to help them, get everything prepared for that. So that could vary on what that looks like. Starting your own business. So we've seen people who, have really great ideas about what they want to do for work. But maybe they're just not, they don't really quite know how to get there yet, or maybe they don't want to take the path of going to college. So we've seen people hire past teachers who are willing to work with them to give them some of those professional skills to learn that job or learn how to be able to do it or navigate that process. So that's an option. Health and fitness, again, social recreation. I'm sure all of you have heard it's a really big thing right now, really promoting getting our individuals into the community. So health and fitness also fit in there. We see this commonly with some of our CP individuals. Maybe it's beneficial for them to have some of those items, related to health and fitness listed on their spending plan. And then equipment for safety. That's a unique one we've seen people use, going back to those independent living skills. Maybe they want to learn how to live on their own, but there are just some things in the home environment that need to be adjusted or accommodated to be able to maximize their potential. And so they've used some of their money to do that. I do also want to point out, again, these are not all inclusive, and they, back to Maria's point, we want to make sure they tailor and they make sense for the person. So, and then really that is for the individual and the family, because we want to make sure that the money is being used to meet those actual goals. We don't want for the family to list something that maybe doesn't really maximize what that person's true goals are. So we just want to make sure, that the services and supports make sense for what that person is trying to achieve with their life. Okay, so just a quick review of what Maria and Deidre and myself have touched on. SDP really hones in on the individual. Many of you might know that our IPP process is also becoming fully person-centered, and so SDP kind of takes the bar up a level in the sense of now giving that individual the control and the authority to really say, you know, maybe regional center traditional services are not quite working out for me, and these are really the people and the supports that I see best fit my life. So we're really looking at that person-centered planning process and what is that person self-identifying as what their needs and their goals and their dreams are. The individual can choose who helps them with their plan. So again, going back to vendored and non-vendored. I did want to mention that somebody can have both on their plan. So we hear people a lot maybe say, I really love my day program, but I want to find another service to meet this need. That's okay. You can have regional center vendored services, and you can have community services or direct care staff of your choosing listed on that plan. An individual can work with an independent facilitator of their choosing. So again, that's just an option. That's not required. I see a lot of questions in the Q&A about that, so we'll get to those. But again, that is an option to do that. Services are paid for from the individual's budget. So you will, like Deidre mentioned, have that set amount that the regional center is saying, you know, we would pay this regardless for your needs, you know, if you were in the traditional model. And then you are taking that budget and allocating that to more appropriate services. But you must stay within that budget. So for Deidre's example, if you know your budget is $50,000, you have to make sure that everything you want to pay everybody, all the services, all the items that you want are all within, they all add up to no more than $50,000. And then the FMS lastly is the one who is the payer of all the supports and services. So, you know, we go a lot more into all of this in our orientation. But again, you know, Deidre mentioned a key thing is if you are interested in SDP, starting to go through some of those FMS providers and really having the discussion about their availability and kind of what you're foreseeing, you know, how much control do you want to have and responsibility over everything and kind of what comes with that. How much do you want the FMS to be involved? And then like Deidre said, that will determine a start date as well. So that is a really first important step because sometimes people are really, you know, they want to transition to SDP ASAP, but maybe the FMS they want, it, you know, has a 4-month wait list. So we, you know, can't transition or assist anybody to transition until their FMS agency of their choosing gives the green light. Okay, so we today have gone over a informational, but the first mandatory step, and this is per DDS, is that anybody interested in transitioning to SDP must attend a self-determination orientation. Right now, the State Council on Developmental Disabilities offers those throughout the month in English and Spanish, and I believe Korean, I want to say, is the other language right now that they're offering. And so if you choose to do that, that's perfectly fine. You could go to their website. They have a calendar, an interactive calendar there that you can see the dates they're offering. You sign up for one, you take the orientation, and then they will email you a certification of completion that you can then send your service coordinator at your regional center to show that you completed that first step. After that, they will reach out to one of us and then we'll start the process. We also at CVRC offer monthly orientations. So our next one that Deidre and I host is on March 14th. They are every second Tuesday of every month from 9 to noon. So that's on our website. We can also put that in the chat too. That's an option where they're live. So sometimes people like to come and ask specific questions or, you know, say, I kind of am already thinking this is what I want to use for SDP. And, you know, sometimes they want to do that. Sometimes they just want to come and hear it and say thanks and move on. So that's an option too. Person-centered planning, again, is a really big part of this process. Because going back to, you know, what type of services inform the budget and also what type of services go on the spending plan, we're really going back to, does that make sense for that person? So I'm just going to give a quick example. Say we get to the spending plan and somebody says, I want to list, you know, my child needs speech, but we're looking at the person-centered plan, we're looking at the person-centered IPP, and nowhere in there does it indicate that that child has any concerns with any speech. then either we would need to update that, or, you know, we all want it to all make sense for that person and make sure that all the services make sense for that person. So once all that is done, there's a lot more that goes into these. There should be like a ton of mini bubbles in here. But those are really the two big parts that, you know, start the process of transitioning to self-determination. And then Maria, Deidre, and myself, we will start answering questions. We see that you guys have some, so I'll let Maria go ahead and start us.
Thank you, Samantha. Let me go through the first question. So the first question is, who pays for the FMS fee? That's a great question. So it used to come out of your certified budget, but DDS changed that recently. So now CVRC will pay for that monthly fee separate from the budget. So the budget will no longer include the FMS monthly fee. That will be a separate purchase order that your service coordinator will complete for you.
Okay, and the next question is, if an IF from CVR, is an IF from CVRC, or how do we choose an IF? And so we do have a list of IFs. We have IFs that we use primarily for our regional center, but there are IFs throughout California, and there's a list for all the providers. When someone through our regional center states that they are interested in SBP, we have the service coordinators send out the list of providers that we primarily work with. I can't remember exactly how many are on that list. It's a pretty good list. We do ask that you reach out to each one of those IFs to find out how they provide services, to find out if they're familiar with types of services and supports that you're interested in. Also, if you would like to use somebody else that's not one of our established IFs, or if you would like to become an IF, there are trainings that, and I listed a link in the chat, but we offer IF training. So in order for a person to become a paid IF, they have to take an IF training. And there's just one training, I believe it's maybe a 2-hour training that is required, but there are also additional intensive IF trainings that we recommend that are highly beneficial, that really go into the person-centered planning process, how to develop the budget, how to create the spending plan. So it's very helpful if you take both the minimum requirement as well as the intensive or extended IF training, so that you could better support the individual that you serve or others in the community if you choose. So there are a lot of free IF trainings. If you go to our website, there are some options. We have courses that are self-directed through NeuralNav. We currently have the option for a live training. I believe it's 6 sessions, 5 or 6 sessions, that begins in March. That will be a little more intensive. So there are also other trainings available through other regional centers. So you can sometimes just do a search for independent facilitator trainings to see what comes up. If we are aware of something, we may promote it on our website.
Okay. I think that answered, I see the 2 about how to become a certified IF, and then how to access the training. So yeah, and Deidre brings up a good point. The IF is a really critical role if you're going to hire somebody, because you want to make sure that, you know, whatever area you're in, that person really knows the area as well too, to be knowledgeable on the things that, you know, are available to you. And then, you know, that, like Deidre mentioned, knowing really like the principles and how SVP works. A lot of the FMSs, you know, rely on the IFs as well and the families to know those service code definitions, to know about SVP, to help support the family with navigating the FMS. So it could be critical, you know, on who you're hiring, just making sure that they, to Deidre's point, the intensive training, that they understand all of that, because remember, you are going to be paying them for a support to help you with those responsibility keys. Okay, Marie asks, are families who have private insurance eligible for SVP and other supports for the regional center? Yes, so a family, anyone who's lifetime and eligible is can participate in SVP. What I will say to that is private insurance could be deemed a natural type of support, right? A resource to the individual. So where that might come into play is as Maria mentioned, whether in traditional or SDP, generic resources still have to be gone through and utilized first. So if we have knowledge that the family has private insurance, and let's say they are wanting to use some of the money for some type of procedure or medical service, we're going to say, please go through your insurance and get a denial, or possibly get a recommendation from the doctor or something like that. And that applies as well for if somebody has Medi-Cal, any type of insurance that's available to them. We're going to ask for a denial because, again, per Lanterman Act, the regional center is still the payer of last resort. So even though SDP is more flexible, the services and supports we have to go through all of that since we are still funding that budget.
So Samantha, that leads into a question I saw that Kim had asked, which is, does the family's income affect eligibility for this program?
No, it does not. No. Well, there are certain things, I will say, like if somebody has SSI, that we, could go back and say SSI is a generic resource. Is it possible you could use some of the funds and have those type of conversations? But no, there's no income limit on an individual or a family.
Great, thank you. So the next question is, what happens if we do not use all the budget or go over budget? That's a great question. So when you are given a budget from the regional center, that is where you will then take it to your FMS. You will complete that spending plan to zero out that budget, so that you can so now what you're doing is you're taking that certified budget from regional center, and now you're allocating those services and supports for the time range of your budget. So we can't go over budget. We will, that is where, your FMS and you will work closely together, because you cannot go over the budget that has been given by regional center. Your spending plan should zero out, so you shouldn't have any money left over or be under on that spending plan. That is why I think we talked about it in one of the slides, or we might not have, but it's the FMS agency should be providing you with a monthly report to show you where you are with your budget, so that you can ensure that you have those services and supports and the hours that you're needing for the rest of the year. I think one of the questions too that I haven't touched on is, if you don't use all of your budget, as you get closer to the end of that budget, you can start to look at, maybe your staff hasn't billed, maybe there's a reason why you didn't get to use all those hours, but it doesn't roll over. That amount doesn't roll over. You'll start a new budget with the services and supports that are needed from the regional center. Another thing I do want to talk about on here is that you are able to call regional center and request any unmet needs or services that you're needing, if you have a change of circumstance throughout the year.
All right, so the next question, is it possible to fund private teacher or remediate skills, reading comprehension, for example? And then it says, I know it was mentioned possible of hiring private tutors for potential skill acquisition for business opportunity development. So that would be a discussion because, and so we just have to start off by saying every situation is case by case, right? So it depends on what the individual's needs are, what their IPP goals are, what has been identified in the person-centered plan, what their qualifying diagnosis is. And so all of our services should directly relate to their qualifying condition and how does this service alleviate that condition? Like, how does it help the person how does it improve their quality of life? How does it help them? School services would be a generic resource for a school-age child. So that would be the question, right? What is the person already eligible for? Is there a generic resource that exists for that? And is there an additional need once they've exhausted generic resources? So any type of service request can be presented to the team. When it comes to increasing the budget, that's a conversation you would first reach out to your service coordinator to find out, you have to identify the unmet need or the change in circumstances that results in that unmet need. And then we have an interdisciplinary team, we call it the IDT. They review services and requests, and they will decide if the budget should change based on that request. So is that need appropriate? Is that a federally recognized service, right? Is it in line with the Lanterman Act or that 4512B? Is it an adaptive or specialized service? How does it meet the needs? So it's a conversation, and a team will review based on the information that the family or individual provide. Definitely showing that generic resources have already been utilized or exhausted is going to be a big part of that conversation.
Okay. Next question. If a student has a medical diagnosis of autism but has not been identified as having educational autism, so they don't qualify for an IEP, can they still receive services through the regional center? So that, I mean, like Leanne was mentioning in the beginning, it's all separate. So we will request records when somebody comes in through our intake, whether through a self-referral or referral for someone else. You know, if it's a school-age child, we'll request school records. Sometimes they request medical records to try to support the diagnosis there. So it's really hard to say without going through the whole intake process, because there's psychologists there, there's case managers, there's clinics, different people that can be brought in. So I think it's just important just to delineate, like Leanne said, you know, just because somebody qualifies as disabled under Social Security does not necessarily mean we would find them or that the school, and vice versa. So they're all separate entities. So, but I would say make an effort, definitely, you know, refer through intake, anybody that you suspect may be eligible for our services, and go through that process.
Question. Next question, is it better or more advantageous to try to become an IF, or do the majority of people use someone local? So I think Deidre or Samantha mentioned, if you're wanting to become the independent facilitator for your child, they must be over the age of 18. So you cannot be a paid IF for your child. They are a minor. You can complete the person-centered plan. You just will not be paid to complete that. I will say at our regional center, most of our families either know of somebody who's an IF and can go that route, or they will request a list from us to go over the list to see who, you know, best meets their needs, meets the language needs. We also have a link to other independent facilitators out of the area who also may cover, you know, the area you live in. So it just really depends on what the family is looking for as far as an IF goes. Like I said, some of them already come to SDP to the transition part, knowing who they're going to use. Other families then say, you know, I'm not really sure who to use, and request that list. Or like Samantha mentioned, if you know somebody that knows your child and you want them to be the IF, they would just have to go through that training. So really it's very person-centered. It's what best meets your needs.
And I just want to add to that. Go ahead, Leanne.
Oh, it's okay, Deidre. No, go ahead, Deidre, go ahead.
I was just going to add to that. The question I think was, is it better to use someone local? And so I will say one of the benefits of using someone local is that they understand what the local resources are. So sometimes using someone from like the Bay Area or down south, Southern Cal, they may have more experience in person-centered planning, but they can't really help with identifying real supports and services here. So it depends on the role you want to play. So if you want to do more of that research into local resources, local supports and services, because you prefer an outside IF, it's just a choice. I would say consider what the needs are. If it's for your child, what types of services and supports do they need? What type of person do you need to support them? And then feel free to reach out to everyone on the list just to find out how they provide services, what experience they have, if they are comfortable or if they are knowledgeable in that specific disability and services and supports that are tailored to that type of disability. So we have a list of questions that we can provide to our families once they say they like to transition and they're looking for an IF. We have a a list of suggested questions to help you vet out those IFs to find out which one would best meet your needs. And it's the same thing with the FMS agencies. So we can't make a recommendation, even though we're very familiar with working with all of the IFs. We can't make a recommendation like this person's better than that person. We do suggest that you do your homework and reach out to all of them.
I was just wondering, Maria, how long does the process usually take? Like, are there timelines or are there wait lists?
I honestly wouldn't say to put a timeline on it. It just really depends on that individual. And a huge thing that I think Samantha had mentioned is that FMS, because our FMS do have wait list. So even if we've completed all the steps that you need to transition, maybe your FMS won't be ready for you for, 6 months after you're ready to go. So it really depends on how fast that person can get everything done, completed on time. But the main thing is having that FMS ready to go with your spot to transition to SDP, because you do need that FMS in order to start self-determination.
I was going to kind of say too, to piggyback on that, and then like the IF thing too. I think between the three of us, we keep stressing that you really want somebody who's really knowledgeable. And a lot of the reason too, where that comes into play with transition, is because let's say you have an independent facilitator that assists you in creating this person-centered plan, and maybe that individual doesn't have a lot of knowledge on Lanterman or generic resources. It's going to then cause a lot of back and forth from the regional center to then come back and say, actually, those are not sorts of things that we could fund, or you need to explore this, or you need to give us this or give us that. And so that can also kind of take time to go back and forth, versus sometimes we've seen people that are very knowledgeable and come fully prepared with what they're asking for. They've exhausted everything. They've explored everything they need to explore. And so that helps the process go a little bit quicker. So I would say having a strong IF is really important, especially now with the culture of SDP and the FMSs. I mean, it really is the responsibility key is very high on the parent to really understand, like, to manage that money. I think going back to the question somebody had about not going over budget, like Maria said, that's part of that responsibility of tracking, or Deidre mentioned, if your staff's billing for more than they should be, that money's going quicker. And that is now the parent. It would essentially be like managing, a banking account, right? Like you're checking in on it and you're watching it. If somebody's not getting what they need, you're reaching out. So all of that sort of comes together in combination.
And that's a great point, Samantha. That's a lot of the feedback I've been hearing from families right now, is some are so bought into this because of the freedom and the tailoring they can do, and others don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. They're like, are you kidding me? I can barely get dinner on the table. I can't manage a whole budget. So
as a team, I mean, we're definitely a support. The service coordinators are a support. But we have just found in our experience that it's just very helpful. I mean, we always tell people attend webinars, do research, read up on DES's website, because SDP, especially in the beginning and for the first year, I would say is like a brand new world to people. There's words they've never heard. We're talking about SDP service definitions. We're talking about FMS regulations and rules. The FMS has a whole standard of laws and regulations that they have to abide by. Stuff on the spending plan, the parents and the IS have to be knowledgeable on how to do that themselves and how to change things. And so we can act as a support, but I would say that definitely, it's taking back, that is the family or the individual saying, we would like our budget to be able to assert, things that the regional center can't do. And so they're really taking on the accountability and the responsibility then of the services.
So before we get back to our list of questions too, and I know we've gone over time, but so if you have to log off, we understand. We are going to keep answering these questions though. And so we want to get these knocked out for everyone. This is such good information. You ladies are amazing. I so appreciate this information. But I want to ask from that parent lens though, is this a forever decision? Like, for instance, if a family signed up for it and tried it for a couple years and were like, okay, no, this is too much, can they revert back?
Yes, they can opt out at any time in the self-determination, in any of the steps that they're in. The only thing is if you decide to come back, you have to wait 12 months from when you stepped out from self-determination.
I think that was somebody's question too.
Was it what I'm? And I
Yes,
don't
it
know-
was.
What do you mean by that? The 12-month waiting for,
To re-enroll.
After-
So if they decide to re-enroll back into self-determination, they have to wait 12 months. Sorry about that, Leanne. Yes.
No, that's okay. I was like, you mean you can't have regional center for 12 months?
No, just self-determination.
Yeah.
So let's say
Got
that
it.
I was in self-determination and I said, oh, it's no
Right.
longer working for my family.
Mhm.
I can absolutely go back to traditional services, but then if I change my mind a month from now and say I want to go back, I have to wait 12 months to re-enroll into self-determination. And of course, then you start the process again. So now you're waiting again
Mhm.
for the FMS too, if they have a spot with the
Right.
FMS you're wanting to choose.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I think it's helpful too, because always from that parent lens, just again, like the IEP world, it's so important to understand what it is you're committing to.
Right.
Is this the 10 Commandments? Is it on stone? Or
Yes.
yeah, there's some flexibility. So thank you for that. All right.
And then I just wanted to add to that really quickly, there shouldn't be a lapse in service at all. So you would continue to receive traditional services all the way up until the point you transition to SDP, and the same thing for transferring back. So let's say you're going to transition to SDP on April 1st. You would continue to have services under the traditional model until March 31st. So it would just be transitioning from one model to the other, one day to the next, the way we would plan that. All right, so I believe the next question is from Rachel. How do I check on an application for Lanterman Act services? Would a private diagnosis or treatment plan report be accepted by CVRC for services? So I would reach out to our intake department. So the CVRC, the office that's nearest your home, either the Merced, Fresno, or obviously it would be Fresno office if you're here probably. Reach out to the intake department. Depending on how the individual was referred, if you did a self-referral, if your doctor referred, they may have records that they would send directly over, or our intake department can request those, or you can provide records if you have them. Usually there's a process where they'll review all the information and then make a determination of whether they have enough information to give a diagnosis or if assessment is required.
And if I can jump in real quick, that is something absolutely a family resource center can help you with as well. I get those questions a lot from families. They say, I left, 4 messages, but I haven't heard back. I can't even imagine working in the intake department. That has got to be a heavy load. And so absolutely, if you're a Clovis Unified family, reach out to me, or I can connect you with your family resource center if you don't live in Clovis and help you navigate that as well.
Okay, the next question, and I think this kind of goes into what Leanne just said. How do we know what kind of services can assist our child if our case coordinator isn't helpful? Transitioning to adulthood is unknown. They also didn't know about self-determination. So there's a couple of thoughts I have there. I would say that SDP, and again, I think we've kind of been reiterating this, is a lot. It's a very different type of, while there are still a lot of things based in the traditional model, such as generic resources and Lanterman, it is a whole new world of understanding how to go through that. And so us 3 as a team, are responsible for helping our service coordinator, which I think now we're at 600 of them within just our area. So we constantly provide training and stuff like that, but you could imagine just with the influx of intake, managing 80 cases and all that stuff, it's kind of on a case-by-case basis. So I would say, while it is, I would love for all 600 service coordinators to know everything about self-determination. Don't get discouraged by that, because we really are there as a support for them when you go start to transition. We are going to be there at every meeting with them. Besides the IPP and that sort of stuff, but anything related to the budget, the spending plan, we really will be there to help everybody understand. So it can be a learning curve for everybody. So that would be my answer to that. And then transitioning to adulthood, I don't know if everybody knows this yet, but we did just hire a, I don't know the official title, but a role to help support the service coordinators and the families for those individuals transitioning from transition units, which is under 18 or 22 into adulthood. And so I think that we've heard what the parents in the community are saying. And so we are trying to address that need and really trying to bridge that gap between, you know, what services are available for adults that are different for somebody under 22. So, and then as always, you know, you have the right to change service coordinators. That's always your right. You can always call and request somebody new if all else fails.
All right, let me go to the next one. I think Samantha covered about keeping your current service coordinator. Yes, you would still keep your current service coordinator. Let's see if we have STP. Do we have a budget for any time for any of their, do we have to budget for any of their time? No. Your service coordinator is not allocated on your budget or on your spending plan. They're there to support you. You know, of course, at your request, and that would also depend on their schedule and you know, the conversations you have with them. But yes, they are able to attend IEPs with you. You would just need to reach out to your service coordinator and see if they're available to do that.
Okay, the next question. My child is now an adult. What types of things will CVRC pay for that? Up until now, I have been paying for it. Yikes. Okay, so rent, health, and fitness needs. So I would suggest going to your service coordinator and letting them know what the needs are. So if your child is transitioning or has recently transitioned, they may have different service needs, and so their IPP may not be updated. Again, it's a discussion, so you let your service coordinator know what their goals are, what their needs are, what things you've been doing, and then ask, is there appropriate service that the regional center can provide? And they may not know right offhand, especially if it's a unique service to your child. They may have to go back to the IDT to discuss what can meet their needs. And if it is an allowable service, if it's, you know, a federally recognized service, or what we would say it falls within the Lanterman Act of services, it can be added to the budget and you can utilize that service through SDP. I hate to hear that you're not receiving services from the regional center, and I think sometimes it is maybe the service coordinator is not aware of what the need is, or there's been a change in circumstances. The service coordinator is not aware. They just need to go back to the team and say, hey, you know, do we have a service that can meet their needs? So please reach out to your service coordinator. They will always be the point of contact. And then as far as SDP services, we are always available. You can contact us regarding what may be allowed in SDP. We have our website, sdp@cvrc.org. We would support your service coordinator in helping with that if you decide to transition. You're
You're
muted.
on mute, Samantha.
Sorry, I'm over here talking to myself. I was reading Shannon's question. Yes, so yes, we do have parents that that are IHSS workers and IFs. The only thing is in self-determination, you just wouldn't be able to be an IF and then list yourself as a support staff, which in IHSS's case, you're not going to be listed because that's a generic resource, so you're not going to pay yourself. The only time that I could see may cross a boundary, which sometimes people will say, well, I only get this much IHSS and I want to add more money for like the additional hours. So you would not be able to list yourself for those additional hours. You would have to find another support staff to fulfill that. So that's the only time I can think about that. You just can't have two people, I think like Maria mentioned, doing the same duty. So you can have someone as a support staff and also as like an independent living kind of, you know, it has to be somebody, each person has to have a designated role.
And then also it depends if the individual, if you're providing 24-hour supervision. So if they're receiving protective supervision for 24 hours, you may not be able to be paid on the spending plan. So that's something that you'd have to look into further.
I think that's all the questions I've seen. Looking through the chat, and I know that Lori has her hand up. I don't know if she has another question or if it was the one that was in the Q&A.
I did see Catherine in the chat sharing that they're not receiving services either. What I hear often from families is there a list of options available? Like they don't even know what to ask for. And then there's all that parent chat, like they'll hear online, well, my kiddos, CBRC is paying for this. And then, families get frustrated. Well, how come they're not paying for that for me? And so I'm gonna let you ladies address that. But one of the things that I like to share with families too is just like an IEP in the educational world is tailored to your child's unique needs. Just because two children have the same diagnosis does not mean they have the same needs. And so strengths and concerns are all different, and family, values and wants for their children are all different. And so I always like to give that disclaimer and refer, like you said, to that service coordinator. But being honest, there are a lot of new service coordinators, right? And families can get frustrated, like, I don't even know what to ask for. And so do you ladies have any input for that or advice for families on how to address that?
I just have,
oh, go ahead,
okay, I was going to say, I just have one thing to suggest, and that is going back to the IPP and just review it. So in every section, daily living, education, medical, go to each one of those sections and what are the goals? And then what is the plan? And so I would look at the plan to see, is there a regional center service that can support us with that? First, are the goals current? So if the goals are current, is there a service that can support us with the process? Because that plan should outline what the steps are, right, to reach the goal. Start there. So whatever's in there's an updated IPP and then there's an older model. So I can't remember if it's called the IPP objectives or the steps. But I would look at that section that outlines the plan for that year, and then ask the service coordinator, is there another service that can support us with that? Generic resources obviously would be school district, again, Medi-Cal or private insurance. But even if you've utilized those and there's still a need, speech. The school is offering some hours for speech. Medi-Cal is funding some hours for speech, but our doctor is still recommending an additional hour. Additional hours. Take that to your service coordinator and say, is there some way that the regional center can fund this service? And so it starts with a question, there's a conversation, and if you feel like you're a regional center, your service coordinator is not knowledgeable about those things and says, I don't know, reach out to other parents. There's lots of parent groups and they can give you advice on how they do things. But you can also, request to speak to the program manager or someone else if you feel like that person is just not able to support you. And, hey, time's of the essence, right? My child is not getting any younger. We really need some support. So if you feel like that service coordinator is not able to meet your needs, you can always ask for a change. We do have a lot of new service coordinators though, so.
Right.
They not
mixed blessing, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful you're getting more help, but there's also that learning curve.
Exactly.
Deidre, how do families even know how to figure out who the program manager is? Is that listed on the website? Would they call the main line?
I would call the main line and ask for the program manager of your service coordinator.
Okay.
Yeah,
But always first try and work it out with your service coordinator, right? See if
absolutely.
Okay, great advice, ladies.
That was just one or two things I was going to mention is that again, we know the frustrating part of having the new service coordinators and having people change. And to your point, Leanne, I mean, we are growing 200, 300 cases every month, which that's right there is about 4 service coordinators for each of those caseloads. So we on our end are also like, we understand that, you know, parents and everybody are frustrated. We have high caseloads. And so we are like diligently trying to get that down, but we can understand how for parents and families, it's difficult to have someone new who's going through an internal learning curve, right? And then trying to support the families. And so we do understand that. And then I was going to mention on DDS website, there is a master list of service codes. I always tell people take it with a grain of salt though, because not every regional center offers every service code or necessarily every service. And some of those service codes are also out of date. But they'll give you a brief description of, you know, like respite and what respite does. Again, it's not all inclusive. The definitions aren't going to be as lengthy as, you know, what an internal program plan would be for somebody or something like that, but it'll give you a general idea of the types of services the regional centers fund. But again, goes back to being tailored and what's
Right.
for that person.
And what did you call that, Catherine? Can you put that in the chat? That terminology used, I just saw a question about that. Was that on the DDS website or the regional center website?
It's on the DDS website,
Okay.
and I will find it and put it in the chat.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. All right. Well, I think we have gone half hour past but honestly, this is so much information, right? And so I just literally cannot express enough how much I appreciate you ladies taking the time to come and share with families how just get our feet wet to even start to understand the terminology. And so I think that takes away a lot of the fear factor. And just knowing where to even ask questions now and to attend an orientation if they're, you know, at all interested in doing this. So
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you for giving us a platform to get the word out about self-determination.
And I did want to mention, Leanne, I'm sorry, we do offer it in Spanish as well at our regional center, but if families are needing it in a different language, like Samantha mentioned, they can go to the State Council on Developmental Disabilities to see what other languages are being offered so that they can take that mandatory orientation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, everyone, we will wrap up. And again, have a wonderful day. And I hope everyone got some great chocolate yesterday. Remember my tip, seize candy, you can pick your selection. So
That's dangerous.
all right, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.